little bit, so I might just repeat the introduction in a second. Let me just check what's happening with the preview. Hope the stream looks okay. Okay. So I'll just repeat that again. I think we're live now. Hi everybody, and welcome to Stoic Mindfulness and Resilience Training SMRT 2018. Welcome to the Modern Stoicism YouTube channel. So the video quality today, I think it's okay. We might be a little bit choppy because I had some issues with the configuration, but hopefully the audio is okay, which is like the main thing really. And you can pause this stream at any time and resume it. That might make it play a little bit smoother perhaps, or you can watch the replay on the video afterwards. So can everyone just begin by typing hello in the live chat? I can see that a load of you are doing that already. And just confirm also if you can see me and hear me okay. Let me know what the video and audio quality is like, and that allows me to kind of at least know what's happening at your end. There's a delay of about a minute on the video actually. So I'll do a little bit of an introduction and some little bits of news and stuff, and then I'll get into giving you an overview of the course. Basically, it's going to be pretty informal today. Should last maybe half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. I'm not the best at timekeeping, as some of you may know. And I can see we've got a few hundred people tuning in already. Just looking at the live chat, you guys can hear me crystal clear. That's good. Yep, keep letting me know how the audio and video are doing. So my name is Donald Robertson, if you haven't met me already. Some of you are probably sick of the sight of me by now. I feel I've done so many of these webinars, but some of you are probably new. We've got nearly 3,000 people doing Stoic Mindfulness and Resilience training this year, which is the largest number we've ever had. Last year we had about 1,800 people. So we didn't do as much to promote it this year. So we're just every year kind of relentlessly a little bit surprised by the growth of interest in modern Stoicism. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We had 8,000 people doing Stoic Week this year as well, which is up from about 7,000. When we started doing Stoic Week in 2012, I think we had 700 people doing it or thereabouts. So it's now 10 times bigger than it originally was. So once again, I'm Donald Robertson. I'm speaking to you from Toronto. I only just got here. I was in Athens, so I got off the plane a couple of days ago. And I'm kindly being accommodated by a Torontonian. Adam Piercy has put me up and allowed me to use his internet for the streaming today, because I'm a bit in transit at the moment. I've been traveling and stuff. So if you just want to say in the live chat where you're from or where you're watching from, post your comments there now, and I'll check in periodically. I'm probably not going to be able to answer a lot of questions today, but if you put @Donald in front of anything that you want to direct to me, I'm much more likely to spot it then, especially the chat's pretty busy, so I'll probably miss questions unless you put @Donald at the beginning of them. So I'll just check in briefly and see Milton Keynes, Los Angeles. Video's choppy, audio's clear. Yeah, we might have to just be stoic with the choppy video, but as long as you can hear me in the audio, that's the main thing. A little bit choppy. Sometimes I can be a little bit choppy. Okay. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself as you're introducing yourselves. I am a cognitive psychotherapist. I've written 6 books now on philosophy and psychotherapy. My latest book, which is coming out soon, you can order it now though. It's called How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, the Stoic Philosophy of Marcus Aurelius. And so I'm still working a lot on that, to get giving talks and stuff about that. Hopefully I'll be able to give some talks soon in Toronto about Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism. And I'm one of the founding members of the Modern Stoicism team, which is a non-profit organisation. It's founded by Chris Gill, Professor Emeritus of Ancient Thought at Exeter University. We started in 2012. We're a multidisciplinary team of volunteers, classicists, psychologists, psychotherapists and philosophers. We've got some well-known authors in the team, and you can find out more on the website, modernstoicism.com. So just a little bit to let you know, it's a non-profit organisation, and also just a little bit of a plug. This course and Stoic Week are free, but if you guys want to support what we do have a Patreon page. If you want to become a patron, it just helps us to fund the research that we do and stuff like that, which is nice if you want to throw a few dollars our way for the organisation. and I'll cut to the chase, I think, and let's get into talking about the course itself then, and prepare you for it a little bit. That's really what I wanted to do today. The psychological exercises that we're covering in SMRT are my area of special interest and expertise, so that's why I get asked to do it. And I just want to get into giving you some practical advice about the course that you're about to embark on. I suppose there's a little preface to that. Let me say a little bit about what SMRT is. What have you got yourself into? So we had Stoic Week, which is a 7-day kind of little taster introduction to different aspects of Stoicism. We were running that for a few years, and then we were gathering some data from it. And we thought what we really need is a more carefully structured course that could potentially be used in outcome studies, similar to clinical trials. So we developed Stoic mindfulness and resilience training. And this isn't an introduction to Stoicism. It's not an overview of Stoicism. It's what I would describe as a more systematic skills training protocol. So SMRT takes fundamental aspects of Stoicism, and it asks you to practice them pretty intensively over a 4-week period of time. So there's a different chunk for each of the 4 weeks. There's 4 sections, stages of the course, and they focus on different psychological skills. So this is really the kind of meat and potatoes. It's like, really getting past all the introductions and stuff and just focusing on the core psychological skills that seem to be conducive to practicing Stoicism. And we wanted to pick skills when we were designing SMRT that we thought were likely to benefit people. And we did some comparisons with research on CBT to try and figure out what would be the best to choose. And we wanted to also pick aspects of Stoicism that weren't just going to be the same as CBT, that were recognizably and characteristically Stoic in nature and likely to be beneficial. And that actually initially sounded like it was going to be difficult to do, to tick all of those different boxes. It's a bit of a balancing act. But funnily enough, it came together very nicely, and we realized it was easy to do that because one of the fundamental concepts in the Stoic Handbook of Epictetus, and probably the most famous saying in Epictetus's writings, or Arrian's writings, I should say, is passage 5 in the Enchiridion, which says, "It's not things that upset us, but our judgments, our dogmata, our opinions about things are what really upset us." And everyone that's interested in Stoicism knows that. Every cognitive therapist knows it because it was taught to clients in cognitive therapy. And so, we've taken that and the dichotomy of control. Some things are up to us, other things are not. And a couple other really fundamental characteristic aspects of Stoicism, and built a skills training program around it that's 4 weeks long. So it's what would be a typical amount of time for a psychological research study where we'd expect to see some measurable improvements at the end of it. And I can tell you we've ran SMRT for several years. We do it once or twice a year. And Tim LeBon analyzes the research data. We gather using the questionnaires. We do use SABs, and we also use 3 well-established psychological questionnaires that are used in mainstream research. And what we've found so far is that there were changes that they're larger than the changes that we saw in Stoic Week. And also we did a follow-up study, a 3-month follow-up, last time we ran SMRT, and we found something that really surprised us, which is normally there's a kind of drop-off or reduction in the improvements that people get from CBT or similar skills training at 3 months or longer. You'd expect that. It's natural. Tim found virtually no change. And that's surprising. And to me, that's very exciting in a way, because I believe that one of the big potentials for Stoicism isn't as a therapy, as people sometimes think, but something bigger and broader and deeper and more important than a therapy. The holy grail of mental health research would be prevention, because prevention is better than cure. And in psychology, we call a preventative skills training approach resilience building, or emotional resilience building. So I believe the real hope for Stoicism is it can provide inspiration or a basis for emotional resilience training programs, which might have a preventative function in the future, make people less prone to developing anxiety or depression in the long term. So it's a little bit about SMRT and where it comes from, how it originated. I'm just checking in with the comments. Someone asked me a question. I'm just going to respond very briefly. Our good friend Bill Irving, who wrote A Guide to the Good Life, and for a time he was on our team actually. He talks about this thing called the trichotomy of control. We can discuss this in more detail in the discussion areas in the course. I can then go into things in a little bit more depth, but I'll just say very briefly now, I don't think it's personally helpful to think of it as a trichotomy. I say it's easier just to stay with what the Stoics say, and this idea of a dichotomy between things that are entirely under our direct control and everything else. And I see that really as providing that way of parsing things is fundamental to Stoic ethics. So I'd stay with Bill's approach is kind of his approach, and it appeals to some people, and he works out the implications of it. But I think for our approach, we're parsing things, conceptualizing them very consistently in terms of this sharp dichotomy. There's a lot more that I could say about that, but I'll leave it there for the time being because I don't want to spend too much time on it in the webinar. Okay, so let's look at what the course actually consists in. Let's see. So I'm just going to pull up SMRT because I just realised my notes are a little bit out of date. So let me have a look at what you guys are actually about to do. What have you got yourself into? So you've got the preliminary section, which if you haven't already, then I'd kind of read through that. It's really just a welcome section or an introduction, but there's quite a lot of stuff in there. And then week 1, which you're starting today, is called Orientation and Basics. And we've got a little reminder at the beginning to do the questionnaire. Tim will nag me if I don't say to you, do the questionnaire. It's really important. It's not mandatory, but it helps us a lot. I have to keep saying that. And then there's like an introduction, an overview of the whole course structure. And week 1 gets right into this concept of Stoic mindfulness. You know, when I was in Athens, I kind of knew this already, but it tickled me a little bit to see there's a lot of signs dotted around that say prosoche, which kind of means like caution, pay attention. And this is a technical term in Stoic philosophy, but like for example, you'll see it on the trains. They'll say like mind the gap, prosoche, and also for signs where people have an Alsatian, a guard dog or whatever, it'll say kind of beware of the dog, and the same term is used. And so Stoicism, we have this technical concept that Epictetus in particular wrote a whole discourse about, and we know from modern research, it's kind of a no-brainer in a way. We know from modern research that mindfulness training in general is beneficial. It's a safe bet for online training because it's fairly easy to do. It's fairly general purpose. You know, it's a good bet for resilience training. So it's a nice, easy thing to do, and it's integral to Stoicism. But Stoicism has its kind of own little twist on that. So Buddhists might use mindfulness of breathing as a technique. There's no real reference to that in Stoicism. In Stoicism, it is very much more explicitly that your focus of attention is on your prohairesis, your faculty of moral judgment. So the value judgments that you're projecting onto external events. So the Stoics believed that we create many tragedies in life of our own making by imposing value judgments on external events that are too strong. We confuse our own intrinsic good and evil with external events like health, wealth, and reputation. And the Stoics, first of all, want us to realize that those values don't inherently subsist in the external world, but they're things that we project onto the world as if we're looking at the world through coloured glasses. And so they want us to take ownership for the value judgments that we make and be mindful of the fact that we're doing that. I feel like to most people, inherently, they'll think, that sounds plausible as a psychological skills training. Yeah, like, you know, I can see how values are integral to distress. Anger is about value judgments, depression is about value judgments, anxiety is about value judgments. And yeah, I can see that being more aware of the fact that we are projecting them onto events, not avoiding fusing them with events, gaining cognitive distance, as we put it, might be beneficial. There's a ton of modern research that suggests that that's beneficial as well. It's a trend in modern therapy, but it was there in Stoicism 2,500 years ago. So seemed to me like that would be a good place to start when we were designing this training. So really characteristically Stoic stuff. And there's some introduction to Epictetus, some self-monitoring exercises. People don't like doing self-monitoring exercises, we find, but there's some reason to believe that they're beneficial. We've got data from previous participants that show that was the bit that people are kind of most reluctant to do. It does require self-discipline and an effort to note down your thoughts and feelings on these kind of forms that we use in CBT. But people who do that and make that additional effort seem to gain more benefit out of the process, although it's not absolutely essential. You know, if you struggle with that, there are really different forms of self-monitoring you can use, and one that I like is just to keep a tally. So if you notice that you're prone to anger or anxiety or depression or something like that you particularly want to work on, either you can fill out a form and do it in detail, or the most minimal form would just be to keep a tally of every time you have a negative or a catastrophic thought entering your mind, or you engage in a bad habit that you want to change. And just that, catching these things early and developing greater awareness of the situations in which they arise and how they develop, very often is surprisingly therapeutic in itself. And also when you keep a tally, you force yourself into a kind of more objective mindset. So you're looking at your own behaviour almost as if you're observing someone else's behaviour. And that kind of cognitive distance, that objectivity, seems to be inherently beneficial as well. And I could bore you to death, dissecting what's going on here. There are a number of psychological processes at play, but there are really, the short version is there are a bunch of reasons why it would be beneficial to keep track of your thoughts in that way, for the majority of people anyway. And we have the audio recording for week 1, which I am going to check, but I think that is the Stoic Attitudes recording, if I remember rightly. Yes, it is. Well remembered, Donald, from last year. So the Stoic Attitudes recording is another weird thing. It's another thing where we kind of we needed to make a recording. So you have these audio recordings we'd like you to listen to every day. They're roughly 20 minutes long. There's a different recording, if I remember rightly, for each week. And for week 1, we go right in with the Stoic Attitudes recording, as we call it. And it's a bit like, it's kind of a self-hypnosis style recording. It doesn't have a hypnotic induction in it. But I was kind of hesitant to introduce this recording because I felt it's too on the nose. It's just giving people really directly a bunch of Stoic attitudes and asking them to really internalize them, treat them as if they're auto-suggestions or affirmations, and practice thinking like a Stoic, practice, what would it feel like to view the world through the lens of Stoicism. And I thought it was a little bit too abrupt in a way, and we figured we could soften that by saying, look, if you're a little bit unsure about Stoicism, if you're like Cicero, like you kind of think it's cool, but you don't quite want to join the club yet and call yourself a Stoic, if you're a Cicero like that. Cicero was a Platonist, an academic philosopher who really loved Stoicism, but he didn't convert to Stoicism. Then I'd say listen to that recording. You could do it with your eyes open, but do it in a kind of more detached way at first if you're not sure, and then or even read the transcript, and think about the ideas and evaluate them in a more detached way if that's what you want to do, if you want to be a Cicero. But many of you are like, no, I'm happy, I want to be a Stoic, I just want to kind of brainwash myself into being as Stoic as possible. I know there are a bunch of people that feel that way because they're already committed to Stoicism. In that case, treat it like a self-hypnosis recording. I know that because on previous iterations of the course, that's what people told me they did, and they really got a lot out of that recording that way. So if you really want to immerse yourself in it, you can do that as well, and you'll get a lot out of it. And there's a quiz and stuff in week 1. Not everyone does the quiz, but I would really encourage you to do it because the received wisdom in e-learning and instructional design is that people that do quizzes and stuff tend to get more out of the course. They're more engaged with it, they remember more, they process the information better. So part of my job is to constantly nag you and say, do the quiz, go and do the quiz right now, because you'll get more benefit out of the process by doing it. So that's week 1. The main thing, I guess, is to prepare you for that. that's mostly what it contains. I kind of feel like I've missed something, but I'll probably remember in a minute. And then I'll give you a more concise overview of the other 3 weeks. Before I do that, I'm going to check in. Yeah, I'm basically trying to brainwash myself. Yeah, there are loads of you guys that say, no, I just want to be brainwashed into being a Stoic, and by all means go ahead and do that. But the enroll page is out. Let's have a look. Are we? Look, we're doing live IT support. Live coding. It's not down. Maybe it was down for a second. It's back up now. It might have been your internet connection there. Like, we're still live on the enroll page. No, not loads of questions at the moment. A lot of chat going on. That's cool. Right. So the rest of the course, what does it actually look like? Week 2 is about Stoic virtue. So we wanted to tackle that. We could have had a course, by the way, that's just about mindfulness and cognitive distancing. We could have just done that, and it would have been beneficial. But in modern research and psychotherapy and acceptance and commitment therapy, for example, which we're partly inspired by here, it's a cutting-edge third-wave cognitive therapy. There's a chunk of it, an aspect of it, of the protocols that often involves what's called values clarification and valued living, which basically gets people to reflect on their core values in life in a particular way, to get much clearer about them, and then to systematically plan their daily routine so that they do things that are more inherently consistent with their core values. So they're living in a way that's more consistent with their core values. And the way that that's conceptualized in modern therapy is clearly very similar to the way that virtues are conceptualized in ancient philosophy and virtue ethics. So it's a no-brainer again that we would put these two things together and come up with the Stoic version of it. So in week 1, it's more cognitive. We've been working on your attention, your distancing. It's more about your thinking. Week 2 is more behavioural, and it's more about things that you actually do with your hands and feet, your arms and legs. It's about your daily routine, like when you get out of bed in the morning till you go to sleep at night, what you're actually doing. And often, there is a cognitive part to that, which is to clarify your values and to think about them in relation to the Stoic virtues. And there are a whole bunch of really useful perspective shifting questions, which I'm sure are in the course. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure that, they'll be in there. Values clarification exercises, what would you like to be remembered for after you've died? If you could do anything and you knew that you wouldn't fail, what would you do? All these kind of magic questions that just help people to reflect more deeply on their fundamental values. But then the really important thing is to put that into practice. You'll never be 100% clear about it. And by the way, this is very similar to what the whole Socratic method was about. Socrates was helping people to clarify what they truly valued in life and to live accordingly. So here we're asking you to do that and to think about it in terms of the cardinal virtues of Stoicism, because we know people love to do that. You might not agree with those virtues. It's not really a big deal. We can be more flexible about it here. You don't have to 100% agree with the Stoic definition of virtue, as long as you kind of clarify your own values more deeply and try to act in accord with them. And what I'd emphasize to you is that's a lifelong process, right? You're not going to complete that in 5 minutes. But if you get started doing it and then accept the fact that there's still a degree of uncertainty, like in the Socratic dialogues, but start testing it out. If you think, well, I kind of think generosity might be a core value, but I'm still not 100% sure how to define it, doesn't matter. Start testing it out in practice anyway, because by doing it and living differently in practice, you'll gain more insight anyway. Don't just get stuck in your head, right? One of the ways in which you'll develop a greater understanding of your values is to try putting them into practice. And for some people, that's really the most important thing. It's the way they'll gain most personal insight. Now, the other thing is, when you suggest this method to people, they often think, wow, how am I going to quit my job and change my whole lifestyle and stuff? Normally what we find is that people gain a lot just by making small changes. And time again, we find that people get big benefits, large benefits, big improvements, often by making what seem at first like quite small changes. So someone who values friendship and wants to be a better friend and thinks that's what they'd like to be known as or remembered for, it seems intrinsically valuable to them. They might just think, well, maybe I should just spend 10 minutes putting together a letter and email it to one of my relatives or friends that I haven't spoken to for a while. And that might just be a matter of scheduling something that takes 5 or 10 minutes, right? And it may be that nothing happens, or it may be that it has consequences. Often behavior change has wider consequences, right? Obviously, sending a letter or making a phone call, somebody may reciprocate or respond. So often these small changes can have surprisingly big effects. They could be a ripple effect, or they just have a more profound effect on your mood than you may have anticipated. And what we're really going for here isn't so much a kind of happy feeling, is a sense of what we're really after here is eudaimonia, right? The Holy Grail. But think of that as a kind of fulfillment, a sense of profound satisfaction that comes, not just from doing things that feel good, but from doing things that seem meaningful and important and valuable to you, that give you almost a sense of pride or a sense of satisfaction. I would prefer to describe it as what you're aiming for is a sense of deep inner fulfillment, a sense that you're on the right track in life and living in accord with your deepest values. You're more at one with yourself. It sounds a bit grandiose, right? But we start off with making small steps, like exercising a little bit more self-discipline or exercising a little bit more friendship or generosity, stuff like that each day. I had clients, for example, in therapy who would do this and just spend 10 minutes a day writing a little bit of poetry and then rip it up and throw it in the bin. But that was enough to give their life revitalize them a little bit and give them a sense that they were at least doing something each day that they felt was more intrinsically fulfilling and meaningful. So we want you to ask some really deep questions here, but also start testing out, at least in small ways, practical changes in your behavior. Okay, so that is what week 2 is about. And then there's all the other week 2 stuff. I just wanted to give you an overview of it, really. I won't go through the contents in too much detail. We'll go on to week 3. Let me have a look. You guys are all chatting away. Batman glass is featured already. We're getting a plug for the Batman. But we should sell them. It's a product placement. Okay, so week 3, we kind of alternate. So we've done the cognitive stuff, we've done behavioural stuff. Now we're back at cognitive again in week 3. And so we're taking this foundational idea of mindfulness and we're developing it further in the week 3 content. And we're doing worry postponement in week 3. So the Stoics taught that there are, in my book, my first book on Stoicism, The Philosophy of CBT, I was very influenced by a French academic called Pierre Hadot, who had listed all these spiritual exercises, he called them, that he'd identified in classical literature. So I spent years raking through classical texts, trying to find more examples of these, and also comparing them, because I thought what he called a spiritual exercise seemed to me to be a psychological exercise of the kind that we use, like really obviously, like the kind we use in CBT. And so I pulled all my notes together and I wrote in a book called The Philosophy of CBT. And in that book, I listed about 20 distinct psychological exercises that I could find in Stoicism. And actually, it depends how you want to carve things up. Maybe some of those could fall under one category or they could be divided up more. So it's a bit arbitrary. And since then, I've maybe noticed 1 or 2 more that weren't in that book. So a revised edition is coming out soon. But there are about 20 psychological exercises in Stoicism. And one of them that Epictetus talks about, I would describe as worry postponement. The Stoics often don't give us names for these techniques. They just talk about the fact they're using them. And this technique actually is well known in ancient philosophy. It was attributed to the Platonists and the Pythagoreans as well, particularly for managing anger, but also for other strong desires or managing anxiety as well. So the ancient philosophers, not just the Stoics, Epictetus mentions this 3 or 4 times to his students. They would say, if you notice yourself becoming angry, take a time out, basically, and wait until your feelings are naturally abated, and then you can think more clearly and rationally about what would be a wise or an appropriate way to respond. And so to me, this seems like an obvious thing to do. So you might go, how do we know that this works, Donald? Well, because one of the leading researchers in the field of worry, which is a field in psychology, believe it or not, very important to modern therapy, is a guy called Tom Borkovec. And Borkovec, like 15, 20 years ago now, did a seminal research study with a bunch of American college students, and he got them, when they noticed they were beginning to worry, to identify worry, to spot it early, and then like get a bit of paper and just write down in a few words what the topic was they were worrying about, fold it up, put it in their pocket. So rather than trying to avoid or suppress the thought, they said, I'm going to just set it aside temporarily and I'll come back and think about it later. So we call that postponement, the postponement strategy, or technically it's called the stimulus control method, is what the behaviour therapist called that originally. But we call it worry postponement. And it worked. There was about a 50% reduction in the frequency and the duration and the intensity of worry that was reported after, I think it was about a week or 2 weeks of practicing this incredibly simple technique. And now this technique is a staple of many cognitive therapy, evidence-based protocols for the treatment of generalized anxiety disorder, which is severe pathological worry. But also it's typically recommended for people that suffer from everyday or milder forms of anxiety and worry. And Epictetus tells his students, when they notice a passion arising, a distressing emotion, learn to catch it early, learn to take a step back from it, and then delay responding if possible until the feelings have naturally abated. I could talk all day about that, but there's a bunch of reasons to believe that strong emotions introduce attentional and cognitive biases that make us stupid. The Stoics said anger is temporary madness, and they were right about that. So once those feelings have abated, we can think more clearly. We're better at solving problems and figuring out appropriate ways to respond, things to say assertively rather than aggressively. And you might say, well, 7 o'clock every evening I'll just sit down and that's my time to think about these things that were upsetting me earlier in a more calm and relaxed environment. And then the Stoics suggest doing other things at that time, like imagine what Socrates or Zeno would do, so what we would call modelling techniques in therapy. And so then we can introduce some other therapeutic techniques as well. But often the kind of simple, the basic underlying technique is where a lot of the power is located. And in other words, you'll often find in therapy clients, you'll go, let's just teach you the postponement bit first, and then later we can start introducing other techniques, imaginal exposure techniques or other things. But for many people, they'll say, just this first step got rid of most of my worry or my anger or whatever. This first initial step, foundational step alone was enough for me, clients will often say. And then other people will say, well, it helped a bit, but I need to do other techniques as well. So don't skimp on the worry postponement strategies. Okay, brief check-in with you guys. We're half an hour in, so we're going to go 45 minutes, it looks like. Guy, you're talking about books. Pierre Hadot, The Inner Citadel, is a fantastic book about Marcus Aurelius. And What is Ancient Philosophy and Philosophy as a Way of Life are also superb books by Pierre Hadot. You should just read all of his books. And he also wrote a book about Plotinus, if I remember rightly. The Simplicity of Vision. I haven't read that for a long time. That's what it's called, isn't it? I think. But mainly, what is philosophy? Philosophy is a way of life, and the Inner Citadel are the ones that would be of interest to people who are into Stoicism. But so read them all; they're fantastic. Those are probably some of the main modern academic books that I would suggest that people read first. Incidentally, as an aside. Then week 4 is about more focused on resilience building. And normally when we're doing a skills training protocol like this, the final stage would be relapse prevention, maintenance, generalization, to use the kind of technical terms. And what that means is, okay, so you've learned some techniques and you've made some progress. How do we know that you're going to keep doing it? Like a year from now, 2 years from now, what if you just quit? You kind of revert back to old habits and stuff. How can we make sure it sticks, the improvement that you've got? And like I say, Tim LeBon's found good empirical evidence already that Stoicism is sticky. Like, Stoicism sticks. So when people do it, I think there are a number of reasons for that, but I think actually, and this is a beautiful thing, like, it's because Stoicism is a philosophy. It has a set of values. It provides a whole way of life, and that makes it stickier. And also the beauty of the surviving literature. So I don't know anyone that has an Albert Ellis or an Aaron Beck tattoo. Yet to meet anyone. I've thrown the gauntlet down. You know, if you've got one, let me know. But I've yet to meet anyone that has an Albert Ellis tattoo. These are the guys that founded cognitive therapy. But I met loads of people that have Stoic tattoos. I meet people that have quotes from Marcus Aurelius tattooed on them. And, you know, in a nutshell, what that tells me is that people identify with Stoicism at a more visceral, existential level. It's almost like a religion to them, or a philosophy of life. So that makes it stickier. And that's important because it means that people are likely to get permanent or lasting benefit from it. And so in the final stage of skills training, what we want to do is encourage that. So we want people to simplify the skills, to reflect on what helped them and process it from that point of view, you know, to anticipate problems they may encounter in the future and troubleshoot them, to look at ways to deepen their commitment, and also to do something that we call generalization of gain, which is, you know, maybe you've used Stoicism to overcome your anxiety about a particular situation. If you can then practice broadening that to a wider range of different situations, then it's more likely to become a generic personality trait rather than a skill that's compartmentalized and associated with a specific problem. So someone that's got a dog phobia, they might use Stoic or CBT techniques to overcome their anxiety about dogs, and that would be a big step forward for them. But if they then use those techniques to help them cope with public speaking anxiety, with anxiety about job interviews, anxiety about undergoing dentistry or surgery or something, and a bunch of other things, maybe even imaginary things, it goes from being a skill that they exhibited in a particular situation to being something that they perceive and experience as being a general purpose coping strategy. So they're more likely then to apply it to surprising situations, across the board improvement that we're then aiming for and opening it out to. So in week 4, we're focusing on things that are likely to broaden your improvement and make it more lasting. So we're going for long-term emotional resilience building in that stage of the course. And just out of curiosity, what is the audio recording? We have a different audio recording for each week. Yeah, the week 4 one is Stoic premeditation, the premeditation of adversity. And this is kind of very similar to something there's different names for it in therapy. But since the 1950s, therapists have asked, cognitive behavioral therapists in particular, have asked people to imagine anxiety-provoking situations and then either relax or mentally rehearse using different skills or whatever. There's a number of different things you can do, but the main thing is the imaginal exposure component, that you systematically picture things that make you feel anxious for long enough and patiently enough that your anxiety naturally abates. And then you can throw other things into the mix as well, like modelling techniques or various coping skills or cognitive distancing or whatever. But the main thing is actually imagining the situation. So we'd encourage you to listen to a recording to help you do that in the final stage. Think carefully about the scenes that you're picking. Don't pick something that will be overwhelming, but don't pick something that will be too easy either. Bear in mind, cut a long story short, that the most common mistake that people make is that they terminate exposure too soon. So they'll picture themselves stroking a cat if they have cat anxiety, but they won't do it for long enough to benefit. Imaginal exposure needs to continue long enough that it's almost boring, and then by that point your anxiety will naturally habituate. It wears off, especially if you keep repeating that. So that's why doing it while listening to a recording is a good idea, because that is a way of tricking yourself into doing it beyond your normal limit threshold of boredom, and so you're dulling yourself, desensitizing yourself in a sense to something that previously made you feel anxious. And if you can do that to a variety of different situations, so not just a dog or a cat, but anything that makes you feel anxious, you'll develop a more general sense of resilience. And that's a strategy, specifically repeated imaginal exposure across a wide range of anxiety triggers is an established strategy for emotional resilience building, but it's also similar to something that we know that the Stoics did. And Seneca in particular, we can see talking about everyday practice, visualizing exile, poverty, disease as if they're happening to you now. So the Stoics were, you know, as usual, 2,500 years ahead of their time in that respect. So we've covered everything, I think. And thank you for spending some time with me. I hope you're as excited about doing SMRT, or Stoic Mindfulness and Resilience training, as I am. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? SMRT. People kept telling me in Slavic languages it means death, right, which I think is kind of appropriate for Stoicism, isn't it? Spiders, yeah. Do the spiders. Or bats. You could be, yeah, there's your stimulus if you happen to have a bat. He had a bat, actually, he does exposure therapy, doesn't he? Batman, like, isn't that part of the movie? He was scared of bats, and then he exposes, he floods himself, actually, is a technical term we'd use in therapy, and he overcomes his anxiety. I'm not suggesting that you're going to turn into Batman by doing exposure therapy, but you never know, it might be worth a try. Okay, so I don't want to bias you, but we've done a bunch of research on this protocol already, and we've refined it over time, so we're not just kind of making it up as we go along. And if you commit to this and put the effort in, and it does take an effort, right? You can't be lazy Stoics. You know, you are going to have to do stuff. You're going to have to listen to a recording every day, maybe do a bit of self-monitoring. But if you're willing to put it in what really is a fairly minimal amount of work, like say half an hour per day or so, you know, all I can say is that our research strongly suggests that you're likely to get significant, substantial benefits from doing that. And I think you know, we're not just learning about the subject of Stoicism. You will learn about Stoicism by doing this, but really it's more practical, right? It's about actually transforming your feelings and your personality. As Marcus Aurelius said, you know, stop wasting time arguing about what a good man should be or what a Stoic should be. This is your opportunity to actually become one, to start putting this stuff into practice, right? So time to wrap up, I think. Adam very kindly is acted as host today, and allowed me to use his living room to do the webinar. So I think it's time to wrap up and say goodbye. And if you happen to be in Toronto, by the way, I have to do some talks for my book, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. And so I might be doing some book signings, or, you know, giving little talks about that as well. If you're interested, come along and chat. Or otherwise, I look forward to seeing all of you folks online in the course. Use the discussion areas. I think we have discussion questions for each week, if I remember rightly. And I would strongly urge you to use the discussion areas, because again, the instructional designer in me knows that by doing that, you are likely to gain more benefit from the course. And in this case, it's not just learning something, it's learning skills and improving yourself. So I know that by doing that, there's a greater chance that you'll actually benefit emotionally and psychologically, and you know, get these really fundamental like benefits that we're all aiming to get out of Stoicism. So once again, thank you very much, everybody, for coming along and listening to me. And please, off you go to learn modernstoicism.com, to the website, and have a look at the week 1 content. You know, maybe put some comments in the discussion area there, maybe have a listen to the audio recording, but get started engaging with the material, and you know, start as you mean to go on. If you have any problems at all, please feel free to email me and get in touch. I'm always happy to help. And other than that, I think it's goodbye for me here in Toronto, and I look forward to seeing you online in the course. Bye everybody. Bye bye.